Hey everyone, how's it going? Forrest here, again with another installment of my complete analysis of all of J.S. Bach's chorale harmonizations. Today we're looking at Nun danket alle Gott, which translates to Now all thank God. This is an interesting chorale, yet another chorale with instrumental interludes, so I removed them from the texture. And because this chorale had, or has, half notes as the prevailing rhythm, it's sped up twice to match that of a chorale that would be sung at 80 BPM, which has been the standard tempo that I've been using for my realizations of the chorale, I guess, or my interpretations of the chorale. So because this uses longer note values, I just assume that the half note is the beat here, so that's just what it sounds like to me. But regardless, this chorale is very straightforward and very simple to analyze, pretty much all just 1/4s and 5s, but we'll analyze it regardless. So we have 1 sharp in the key signature, we start on G major, we end on G major, so I reckon we're in the key of G major. And before we start off, there's actually a slight formatting error. A phrase got cut off here. These notes are actually tied together, and this is actually tied as one end of a phrase. So it's a little awkward to look at, but we'll just imagine that the D major is a whole note here rather than being 2 tied together half notes. But we start off with a G major triad, and then we move to another G major triad, so no need to reanalyze. This D is just arpeggiating, part of an arpeggiated figure of G major in the tenor, so the next 2 beats are actually G majors as well, so no need to reanalyze. We have C, G, C, and E. That's a C major triad in root position. That's a 4 chord. Then we have C, G, C, and E again, another 4 chord, before we cadence on 1 G major, G, G, B, and D, making this not an authentic cadence. I was just saying it out loud and jinxed myself. Not an authentic cadence, but a plagal cadence. Next, looking at the end of the next phrase, we have a perfect authentic cadence in the key of G major. We start off with G, G, D, G, and B. We move to D major, or D7 over F sharp, D, A, and C, which is 5, 6, 5. Then we move back to G as we would expect, G, D, G, and B, root position. Then we have D, D, F sharp, and A, root position 5 chord, D major, passing 7th on the bass, B, D, G, and B, first inversion G major triad. Gets turned into root position because the bass skips down. We see that figure in Bach's vocal writing a lot. D, D, G, and A, this G being a suspension, 4/3 over the bass, still implying a D major triad, resolves on beat 2. Really, this should be 2/2 rather than 4/4, but it is what it is. And then, of course, we cadence on G major, our tonic, G, B, D, and G. All right, looking to the end of our next phrase, which is here, by the way. It's a very strange formatting thing that my engraving software decided to do, but it is what it is. We have a plagal cadence in the key of D major. So there's this dichotomy of the A section being in G major and the beginning of the B section being in D major. So it has that kind of typical binary form. So I think even though, it sounds like a direct modulation to me, like I guess hypothetically speaking, you could analyze this as a 4 chord in the key of D, but the way that I hear it is this is just a direct modulation. So we start off with D, which is now our tonic, and the reason why we know this is because of just the way that the music is presented. This sounds like, I don't have any reason to believe that this feels like it's continuing in the key of G after having listened to it. It sounds like a new thought, even though the chord is common, which is an interesting effect. But we start off with D major, we have another D major chord, another D major chord, we move to G, G, D, G, and B, which is our 4 chord. As you can see, we're seeing something very similar to the previous first phrase of the section before this one. Then we have G, D, G, and B, another G major chord with a passing tone in the tenor, and then we cadence on D major, plagal cadence, 4/1. And I know this cadence looks kind of strange because everything would be happening a little bit more neatly if this was its own, if these two chords were preceding this one in their own measure. But like I said, formatting sometimes messes up in my engraving software. But continuing ahead, we have a perfect authentic cadence at the end of the next phrase, F sharp, D, A, and A, which is D major in first inversion, so that's 1/6, G, D, G, and B, that is a 4-chord G major in root position. Some passing tones here where we have G, E, G, and C sharp, which is kind of like a passing 7 chord, which is where we would expect 4 to go. However, because we have F sharp, A, and D on the next bar, I'm just going to call those passing tones and talk about how it's kind of like a passing 7, because this F sharp, or this D major over F sharp is already a dominant, so this is kind of prolonging the dominant, or extending the dominant, just an extra half beat before it. We get a passing note in the bass before we get G, E, A, E, A, and D. Similar to the form of the first section, we have a 4/3 suspension, but this time in the melody. But we know that A major is being... I'm so sorry, I messed up my analysis here. I'm going to go ahead and walk that back and say that this is F sharp, A, and D, which is a tonic triad in root position. And we're going to go back here and call this a C sharp. We're going to call this a C sharp diminished chord in first inversion. So sorry, just the visual and just the overall look of this chorale has thrown me for a loop. So yeah, we would expect 4 to go to 7/6 to go to 1/6. So apologies about that confusion. So that this is a totally normal progression. I kept on thinking that we were in the key of G. No, we are still in the key of D. But then we go to A major, which is our dominant, A, E, A, and D, the D being a 4/3 suspension over the bass. And then we have A, E, A, and C sharp, which is where it resolves. We know this whole section's really just implying 5 anyways, before we cadence on D major, which is our tonic, D, F sharp, A, and D. Moving ahead, we have actually kind of an interesting cadence here. This is a perfect authentic cadence in the key of C major. So we're going from D major to C major via this G major chord. So G major, G, G, B, and D. It's a 4 chord in the key of D. In the key of C, it's our 5. So they do have chords in common despite being distant. But remember, there's an instrumental interlude here, so it's probably more of a smoother progression. But regardless, it still can be analyzable purely from a choral standpoint. We have C, G, C, and E, which is our tonic triad, C major. Then we have D, F, B, and D, which is B diminished in first inversion, 7/6. Then we have E, E, G, and C, another C major triad, but this time in first inversion, passing tone in the bass. We then have G, D, G, and B, which is our dominant G major, and then we cadence on C major, which is our tonic, C, E, G, and C. This C is preparing us for our final cadence, which is a perfect authentic cadence in the key of G major, and this C is now our subdominant. We then have G, D, G, and B, which is our tonic, G major. That goes to D major, D, D, F sharp, and A, which is our 5, which goes right back to G, G, D, G, and B. We then have D major, D, D, G, and A, of course with a 4/3 suspension over the bass. Still implying a 5 chord, resolves on the next beat before we get G major, G, B, D, and G. And we have a contender for one of our quickest videos on the channel, because this chorale, when I exclude the instrumental interludes, that was hard for me to say, leaves us with a very sparse chorale with a very quick harmonic rhythm in the key of G major with very little harmonic variety. This is like a chorale for the people, I would imagine. Like, this really you can, very simple, very plain, but still very beautiful and expressive with suspensions. But all in all, I imagine the instrumental interludes are what sort of create the entire musical picture here. But because we're really only focusing on Bach's vocal writing on the channel, that's what I've chosen to focus on. So I'm excluding the instrumental writing, as there's sort of a different type of analysis that goes into that, a little bit more inference and a little bit more reading between the lines, whereas vocal writing tends to be a little plainer. It tends to be, at least when there is a homorythmic texture, rather than say like a contrapuntal piece of music. There's much lighter counterpoint here than in some of the other choral movements that you see in Bach's cantatas and just his vocal writing in general. But regardless, very simple chorale today, very straightforward to analyze. Thank you so much for watching the video. Thank you so much for continuing to support the channel. I have a video planned for every single day until I run out of the chorales to analyze, and that means that there's like another year's worth of content. So if you want to follow me along on this journey, feel free to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you get notified when I upload, which will be once a day at varying times depending on when I have free time. So I will cap the video off on that sentiment. Thank you again so much for watching. I'm looking forward to tomorrow's analysis, and I hope you take care.